The first thing you want to look at is best practices in phone calls. Whilst you are placing the calls, what are the things you need to take key notice of? So whilst placing the call, you need to ensure that you have a notebook and a pen with you. Very important, because you might be taking some values to use for calculations, taking some responses to probe the respondent, and also have a soft validation of some of the subsequent responses the respondent gives you. It's very important. You also need to have a charging facility near you, preferably an extension board where you can quickly plug in your devices when your devices are running down in terms of the power. And you also need to ensure that you have the correct time and date set on your device. This time and date is actually recorded in most times as variables in our data. So as you are conducting the interview, the tablet will record the date and the time, and a wrong date and a wrong time on your tablet means a wrong data. Remember, you download the forms, and you are not going to be conducting these interviews online. So when we are taking, or when the survey is recording the time and date, and your time and date is wrong, you are actually giving us wrong data. So in terms of data quality, you need to set the right time and date. And then also you need to have ensure that you have a very quiet environment where you are placing your calls to foster the confidentiality and privacy of the conversations. Also, you need to ensure that you have access to drinking water, or a water bottle that is filled with water, or maybe water dispenser just near you that you can quickly turn out to in case you need to drink water. Now, let's talk also about building rapport with respondent. Building rapport with respondent, what to do. You know, the extent to which a respondent cooperates with you before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview, depends on the relationship you have built or you have established with her, especially at the beginning of the survey. Now, and to foster this rapport in the interview, we have some key things that we want you to take critical notice on to build a good rapport with your respondent. So the first thing is to make a good first impression. And when we talk about making a good first impression, we are talking about opening an interview with like greetings, introducing yourself well, and try to let the respondent have a very good first impression about you, the organization, the project, and the interview. Then the second one we want to talk about is to keep a positive attitude. So keeping a positive attitude is to avoid adopting apologetic manner or phrases such as "Are you too busy?" I mean, such questions invite refusal. They usually lead to refusals before you even start the interview. So you would rather want to say that "I would like to ask you some few questions," or "I would like to talk with you." Don't go like are you too busy? That's not really a best practice. Then answer any questions from the respondent frankly. Ensure that you are prepared to answer any questions that the respondent might pose, and explain what is meant by confidentiality and all those things. And to ensure that you have this going through your project models, you need to take critical notice of some of the key things that are explained to you in your project models. Now, let's talk about in terms of conducting the interview, whilst asking the questions, what are some of the key things you need to take notice of, you need to do, and the things you need not to do. So the first thing is to ensure that you are comfortable and familiar with the entire questionnaire. Going through the project model, ensure that you are comfortable and familiar with the entire questionnaire. If you realize that you are not comfortable and familiar with the entire questionnaire, speak with a project management team to help you familiarize yourself with the instruments and areas that you need clarity. and also ensure that the respondent understands the response options. If there are options to choose from, multiple select, single select, select one, responses, ensure that you have places where you are supposed to read the responses loud, and ensure that you have read it loud and the respondent understands each of the responses clearly. And also ensure that you read each question exactly as they are written and go slowly. Don't be too fast on the questions. Read them the way they are. Don't paraphrase the questions. Right? A small changes in the word could alter the meaning. If you need to translate into a local language, use the key dictionary words that are agreed upon. Then you also need to ask the questions in the order they appear. Okay. Sometimes the respondent might, in answering one question, might answer the next question, but you still need to ask the question, and in a nice way explain to them that you have to ask each of the questions just to be sure. Then now let's look about seeking clarification. Listen, when you are asking questions and the respondent wants to seek clarification here and there, there are sometimes we have dictionary words, as I mentioned briefly, where we translate some of the key words into the local languages. If we are using local languages, if the respondent is not sure of his understanding of your question, make sure you use the key language in dictionary translations to clarify the questions to the respondents. Then otherwise you repeat the question verbatim to the respondent. So now let's talk about probing. There are certain times a respondent gives you a particular answer and you would have to probe. Let's look at what circumstances, instances, and things we need to do. So the first one is if a respondent's response or answer is incomplete. So if you realize that this answer is not actually complete, is not actually what the response we desire, maybe the person answers one part of the question and the other part is still left hanging, employ an unbiased technique to encourage answers that are more complete and appropriate. So as we advise that you probe for all questions that responses are not clear, take critical notice of questions that involve don't know and questions that are open-ended questions. So these questions are to be probed well. We need to probe well on these questions. Don't know questions. For example, if you say don't know, the respondent might take it to mean that he doesn't understand the question, or maybe he needs time to think about it, or maybe or he thinks the question is too personal. So if the respondent does not, like, you probe, if the person says I don't know, you need to probe. If you realize that the respondent doesn't understand the question, you repeat the question. And when you probe and you realize that the respondent needs time to think about the question, for which reason he has said I don't know, just allow him or her some time to think about the question and determine the appropriate response. And if you ask the question and the respondent say I don't know, and you probe and probably realize that the respondent said I don't know because he or she thought the question is kind of too personal, or the person fears judgment, or you need to remind the respondent that all the information we collect are confidential. So in this case, you need to stress on confidentiality of all the responses we receive. So probes must be neutral. That is, avoid sending a message about what is the good or bad response. You try to lead the respondent to a particular response, probably because as you are making the calls, you see a pattern of answer that is common to all respondents, and as this respondent is struggling, you try to say something to lead the respondent to say a similar thing as the other respondents are saying. This is a very, very unapproved, unauthorized, and unallowed way of probing. Probe neutrally and receive the correct responses from the respondent. And as I said, probe, don't know responses, and open-ended responses, especially. Now let's talk about providing feedback. Providing feedback, and here we are narrowing on verbal feedbacks. So verbal feedback should actually be selected from prepared list of phrases. Like example is like, that's very useful piece of information. After the respondent responds to a question, you tell him that's a very useful piece of information. Thank you, or thanks. Oh, I see. Oh, that's certainly useful or helpful information. So or you say thank you, or that's useful, to ensure that the feedback is not evaluative of the content of the answer. So just make it in a way neutral. Don't use the word like okay for feedback, especially voice feedback. Okay, because okay can actually be misconstrued to mean an agreement with or approval of the responses answer or not. And okay can also be misconstrued to maybe approval of the responses from the respondent. So we don't want to send we don't want to send an impression that you are agreeing or you approve the responses. So don't use okay. Use thank you, certainly, this helpful, this useful. These are very appropriate ways of providing quick feedbacks, verbal feedbacks especially. Now, let's talk about recording answers, receiving answers. And as we said, we are going to use a questionnaire. You ask questions in the order they appear and verbatim. And also, as you receive the responses from the respondent, listen carefully and to the responses and enter answers immediately the respondent gives you the responses. Don't wait for a minute. Don't just wait or relax to record it after some time, but record it immediately it is given to you. Follow the specific instruction for each question session. There are some sessions, and of course every session has instructions that we need to follow. Read the instruction, understand it, and follow it well. Instances where you need to read the instruction to the respondent, do so, and let the respondent understand it well. Don't make up answers to questions under two scenarios, because sometimes maybe there's a problem with the tablet, or maybe the questionnaire has a bug and you want to just proceed. No, don't do that. Or maybe you just want to do that because you want to move forward and be quick. You need to provide accurate responses. If the questionnaire has an issue, report to the project management team for the issue to be fixed. And in ending the interview, you need to end the interview actually well. And in ending, you thank the respondent for the cooperation the person has given you and the time the person has actually given you, and give the respondent the incentive respondent gift. If it's a call credit, may ensure that it's sent to the respondent, and reassure the respondent that all informations are held strict and with confidence. Reassure the respondent that all the responses provided are held strict, and also reassure the respondent of confidentiality of what the respondent the response and also reassure the respondent of all of confidentiality of all the information he or she has actually given you. And also the last thing to note is very important, is to inform the respondent of a possible follow-up of responses, right? A possible follow-up means a back check. So ensure you tell the respondent that probably a colleague might call you to validate some of these responses, and you need to let the person be ready, prepare the person's mind for a back check if applicable to your survey. So these are just quick best practices and things to do and things not to do in phone survey. So just to review what we learned today has been all about data quality issues. Today we looked at how to effectively use SurveyCTO with some demo videos and other things. We looked at how to use advanced cases like case management, and we also dealt with best practices in survey. Best practices. I'm sure that with these lessons you are very much equipped to ensure that we have the highest quality of data from you. We hope and trust that you are going to bring us the best of all data in terms of quality as you proceed, and I know that this lesson will be useful to you in other projects and wherever you find yourself in the research world. Thank you.